welcome back to our channel. Stop spending rare pennies by mistake. Like and subscribe to find out which ones are worth money. The year was 1978. The United States was inching toward the close of a decade defined by cultural transformation, political mistrust, and economic uncertainty. The mint was operating at full throttle, producing millions of coins each day to feed an economy that still relied heavily on cash. Among the most common of those coins was the 1-cent penny, bearing the ever-familiar image of Abraham Lincoln on its obverse, unchanged since its first appearance in 1909. On the surface, the 1978 penny seemed like just another entry in a long and predictable series, a coin not meant to stand out, not destined to stir headlines. But what lay hidden within a small fraction of that year's production would quietly challenge that notion and redefine the word ordinary. Inside the walls of the Philadelphia Mint, where no mint mark was placed on coins at the time, Lincoln cents were struck with unassuming repetition. Die after die, press after press, billions of pennies were churned out. The copper composition was still in effect, as the zinc transition wouldn't come until a few years later. At first glance, 1978 wasn't a year known for dramatic coin errors. There were no commemorative designs, no metal experiments. But that same lack of fanfare may have helped disguise something deeply unusual, a deviation so subtle it would take decades to be noticed and even longer to be understood. Ellis Greer was never the kind of collector who sought attention. He lived in North Carolina, a retired postal worker who had taken up coin collecting as a quiet hobby to pass the time. His friends knew him as methodical, maybe even obsessive, when it came to details. He was the type who could spot a die rotation or a misplaced mint mark before most people even noticed the date. He had a particular interest in Lincoln cents, not because they were glamorous, but because they were ubiquitous, easy to find and full of secrets for those who looked closely enough. In early 2015, Ellis found himself at a local estate sale browsing old jars of coins. One mason jar in particular caught his eye, labeled simply, Pennies, 70s. He paid $15 for the whole jar, took it home, and began sorting under his bright magnifier lamp. Most of what he found were circulated and dull, worn nearly flat from decades of use. But one penny stopped him cold. It was dated 1978 and had the clean, sharp appearance of a coin that had seen very little wear. But it wasn't the luster that drew him in, it was the letters. The word Liberty looked thicker than usual. Not uniformly so, certain letters had rounded edges, others appeared doubled, their contours slightly separated like a shadow hugging a form. He tilted the coin under the light. The B had a distinct notch at the top left. The D had what looked like two vertical bars running close together. Then he moved to In God We Trust and noticed the same thing. The W was flared unnaturally, and the T seemed to echo. He knew machine doubling could mimic these traits, but what he was seeing was raised and well-defined, not flat or shelf-like. The coin had clear evidence of hub doubling, a doubled die, a true minting error. He turned the coin to its reverse, not expecting much, but found more. The 1-cent inscription and United States of America both had slight, raised duplications along the letter's edges. Most striking was the Lincoln Memorial itself. Between the columns, tiny lines of doubling appeared near the statue of Lincoln, just barely visible but undeniably present. Ellis had never seen anything quite like it. He packaged the coin carefully and sent it off to a respected grading service, including a note with his observations and suspicions. Weeks passed. When the results arrived, the coin came back certified as a double die obverse with minor reverse doubling, an exceptionally rare combination for a 1978 cent. It was graded MS 64 red, meaning it retained much of its original red copper tone with only the faintest signs of wear or environmental impact. Numismatic experts confirmed the coin's authenticity and its rarity. Unlike more well-known double die years like 1955 or 1969, yes, the 1978 double die variety had no established catalog entry at the time. It was essentially unknown to the mainstream collecting world. But Ellis's discovery changed that. Word spread across online forums and coin clubs. Collectors began pulling out their 1978 cents and rechecking them. And slowly, more examples surfaced, though never in large numbers, what set this coin apart was the consistency and clarity of its doubling. It wasn't dramatic like the famous 1955 cent, but it was deep enough to distinguish it from machine doubling, and persistent across multiple elements of the coin. Over time, numismatists traced the origin to a misalignment in the die hubbing process used during a short production run at the Philadelphia Mint. The hypothesis was that a single working die, misaligned during the hubbing phase, created a small batch of coins before being pulled from circulation. That batch had likely been released without notice, indistinguishable from billions of other cents unless scrutinized closely. The excitement grew as high-grade examples began appearing. A MS 65 red specimen, with almost flawless surfaces and vivid copper sheen, fetched $42,000 at an auction in 2018. A year later, a second MS 66 red with even sharper doubling sold privately for over $70,000. The market was beginning to realize that the 1978 double die wasn't just rare, it was grossly underreported. Many collectors had overlooked the year entirely, assuming there was nothing to find. That false sense of normalcy made the error all the more thrilling that in 2020, a breakthrough came when a collector discovered a 1978 double die with full red luster and almost perfect centering. The coin had been sitting in a safe deposit box for years, inherited from a relative who collected coins but never had it evaluated. This new example was eventually graded MS 67 red, the highest grade known for this variety. When it went to auction, it triggered a bidding war between two private collectors and a museum curator. The final sale price? $128,000. As with all great era coins, the 1978 double die penny carried with it a quiet mystery. No official documentation ever acknowledged the die flaw. No internal mint memos referenced its production. Yet the physical evidence told a different story, of a die that slipped through quality control, of coins that entered circulation unremarked, and of a decades-long wait for someone to recognize what had truly happened. Today, the 1978 1-cent double die penny stands as a cornerstone of modern Lincoln cent collecting. Only a limited number of verified examples exist, most in circulated condition. Mint state red specimens are exceptionally rare, with fewer than a dozen certified above MS 64. Each carries a premium depending on strike quality, surface preservation, and clarity of the doubling. For collectors, these coins are not just anomalies, they are testaments to the power of observation, to the idea that even in the most ordinary objects, something extraordinary can be hiding in plain sight. Current market values reflect this growing appreciation. Lower grade examples with modest doubling can command a few $1,000s. Mid-tier mint state examples range between $40,000 and $70,000. But for the finest known specimens, those with strong obverse doubling, clean surfaces, and full red coloration, the value stretches from $65,000 to $128,000, depending on timing and demand, and all of it began with a man at a flea market, a dusty jar of pennies, and a sharp eye that saw what generations before him had missed. A 1978 cent that was never supposed to be anything more than spare change, quietly rising to the status of legend. The year was 1987, a time when America was navigating the tail end of the Cold War, seeing a resurgence in consumer confidence, and embracing a technological revolution that was just beginning to take root in everyday life. Yet, while headlines focused on Wall Street booms and diplomatic shifts, the U.S. Mint quietly continued its daily routines, minting billions of coins for a country that still lived heavily through cash. Among the most produced coins that year was the Lincoln 1-cent penny, a humble copper-plated zinc coin that had replaced the earlier bronze composition just 5 years prior. It was business as usual. Or so it seemed. Minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the 1987 penny was intended to be just another entry in the vast ocean of modern Lincoln cents. The mint had transitioned fully to the copper-coated zinc planchets by this time, lightweight, cheaper, and prone to environmental wear. Nothing in 1987's mintage was expected to stir the waters. There were no announced design changes, no special commemorative editions. Yet behind the scenes, in the silent movements of the mint's die hubbing machines, something minuscule yet consequential had occurred. It would take years, decades even, before anyone noticed. Grant Lawrence wasn't a professional numismatist, nor was he chasing rare treasures to sell for a fortune. He was a high school history teacher from Wisconsin, a quiet man with a passion for the details most people overlooked. Every summer, while his peers traveled or relaxed, Grant spent his afternoons at coin shows, estate sales, or local swap meets. He had an affinity for Lincoln cents, not for their monetary value, but for what they represented, a continuous link to history. One year stamped at a time. In 2018, while browsing a table at a church fundraiser, Grant came across an old coin folder labeled Lincoln Cents 1980 to 1989. Most of the coins were heavily circulated, dull from age and use. Still, he picked it up for $5 and tucked it under his arm. That night, he opened the folder at his kitchen table, methodically examining each penny under a 10x loupe. The 1982 small date drew his attention briefly, but then he reached the 1987 penny, Philadelphia Mint, no mint mark, bright in color but oddly struck that it was subtle, but Grant had trained his eyes over years of careful examination. The Liberty inscription seemed uneven. The E and R had split edges. In God We Trust had similar strangeness, with the W showing an extra notch and the T appearing like it had been struck twice. He turned the coin to the reverse, and his breath paused. The Lincoln Memorial looked distorted, still recognizable, but the columns seemed to overlap faintly, and the statue of Lincoln inside bore signs of doubling. The words, United States of America, and 1 cent, had faint ridges along their outlines. Grant placed the coin in a protective case and began researching. After ruling out mechanical doubling and die fatigue, he contacted a regional coin grading service. They were cautious but intrigued. The coin was eventually sent to a nationally recognized numismatic lab, where it was authenticated as a doubled die obverse and partial doubled reverse, an error that had gone completely unrecognized by the broader collecting world. The experts determined that the doubling resulted from a misalignment during the die creation process, specifically during the hubbing stage, when a working die is impressed with a design from the master hub. If the hub shifts even slightly between impressions, the result is a doubled die. The physical doubling on the 1987 penny was sharp and raised, clear evidence that it occurred at the die level, not from post-mint damage or strike shifts. The implications were significant. No major double die variety had been catalogued for 1987 until this point. Grant's discovery opened the door to a quiet reevaluation of what had been considered a mundane mintage year. As news spread through forums and collector circles, a ripple of excitement followed. Suddenly, people who had dismissed the 1987 penny as common were pulling them out of jars and folders, looking for similar markers. A few more examples surfaced, some with moderate doubling on the obverse, others showing faint traces on the reverse. But none matched the clarity of Grant's original find. In 2019, the coin went to public auction. It was graded MS 65 red by a top-tier service, making it one of the highest quality modern error cents of its type. Under magnification, the doubling was textbook perfect, raised, rounded, and uniform. The final hammer price stunned even the auctioneer, $82,500. The buyer was a private collector who specialized in rare Lincoln cent varieties, but the story didn't stop there. Months later, another MS 64 red example was found in an old roll purchased from a Virginia flea market. This second specimen showed identical doubling on Liberty and In God We Trust, but slightly less detail on the reverse. Still, it confirmed what numismatists were beginning to suspect: a single misaligned die had likely been responsible for a small batch of doubled die cents in early 1987 at the Philadelphia Mint. These coins entered circulation unnoticed, their error hidden in plain sight for over 30 years. One of the more compelling developments came in 2021 when a third example surfaced, this time graded MS 66 red. Unlike the others, it showed a nearly flawless surface and more pronounced reverse doubling, particularly in the Lincoln Memorial columns and the inscription. The coin became the centerpiece of a major East Coast auction and sold for $110,000 to an international buyer. Still, the exact number of surviving 1987 double die cents remains unknown. Estimates suggest fewer than 20 verified examples exist, most of which are in circulated condition with weaker doubling. What makes the error so elusive is the subtlety. Unlike the dramatic doubling of the 1955 cent, the 1987 variety demands close scrutiny, a magnifier, patience, and a trained eye. Today, the 1987 1-cent double-die penny is gaining recognition as one of the most desirable modern errors in U.S. coinage. It stands not only as a valuable piece of numismatic history but also as a testament to how even the most routine coin, in the right light, can reveal a story few ever expect. Its discovery wasn't the result of high-tech tools or million-dollar collections, but of careful observation and an appreciation for the details others overlook. For collectors lucky enough to find one, the value is no longer in doubt. Lower-grade circulated examples can bring in several $1,000s, depending on clarity of the doubling. Mint state red examples with full strike and clear doubling can fetch between $55,000 and $110,000 depending on condition, grade, and provenance. A penny that once passed unnoticed through gas stations and grocery stores now commands the reverence of a rare artifact, proof that sometimes, even in the smallest corner of history, something remarkable waits to be found. The year 1993 brought with it a subtle sense of transformation. The Cold War had officially ended, the economy was stabilizing, and America was embracing the future at a cautious but steady pace. In the midst of these shifting times, the U.S. Mint continued its routine work, producing millions upon millions of coins for an economy still fueled by physical cash. The Lincoln 1-cent penny, unchanged in design since 1959 and composed of copper-plated zinc since 1982, remained one of the most widely circulated denominations. It passed from hand to hand without attention, a background piece in a world focused on bigger headlines. And yet, even in a year that seemed ordinary on the surface, something quietly remarkable slipped through the minting presses, something few would notice for decades. The 1993 Lincoln cent was struck in 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Like the years before and after it, the coin bore the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. By all accounts, the design and production process was routine, the mint operating with a confidence earned from decades of repetition. But in that exact repetition lay the possibility for human error, and when such an error occurred, it wasn't always caught. Hidden in the sheer volume of coins struck that year was a subtle but fascinating deviation, one that wouldn't come to light until long after most of the 1993 cents had faded into circulation. No announcements were made. No special collector's alerts were issued. The mistake was too quiet, too discreet, and it would take someone with a very careful eye to bring it to the surface. Miles Thornton had spent most of his life around machines. A retired auto mechanic from Kansas, he wasn't a collector in the traditional sense. But he had inherited several coin jars from his grandfather, old Folgers cans and mason jars full of pennies, nickels, and dimes. One rainy afternoon in the fall of 2021, Miles decided to finally sort through them. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time and maybe hoping to find a silver dime or an older wheat penny. It was in one of those cans, nearly at the bottom, that he spotted the 1993 penny. Something about it felt different. The coin had a slightly deeper color, and under the kitchen light, its lettering looked oddly layered. He pulled out his old loupe, the same one he used to inspect spark plugs back in the day, and brought it closer to his eye. Liberty immediately stood out. The B and E showed signs of doubling, subtle but definite. The notches on the letters were raised, not flat, which ruled out the more common machine doubling. Curious, he examined, "In God We Trust." The W and T were clearly doubled. The letters weren't just shadows, they were actual impressions, stacked as if stamped twice from slightly different angles. The reverse was no less intriguing. The words "United States of America" and "1 cent" had ghost-like outlines, especially around the C and T. Even the Lincoln Memorial displayed signs of distortion between the columns. Where the statue of Lincoln stood, Miles didn't know exactly what he had, but he knew it wasn't normal. He posted clear, magnified photos to an online coin forum, asking for advice. The reactions were immediate and intense. Seasoned collectors commented within minutes, some skeptical, others excited. A few even asked if the coin was for sale. The general consensus soon formed: this was a previously undocumented double die from 1993, a variety no one had catalogued yet, with clear hub doubling across both the obverse and reverse that he was urged to send the coin to a grading authority. When it returned weeks later, the result validated everything. It was officially classified as a double die obverse with minor reverse doubling, graded MS 65 red. For a copper-plated zinc cent, that was a significant achievement, especially considering how easily these coins oxidized and degraded over time. Collectors took notice. This wasn't just an oddity, it was a genuine minting error from a year few people paid attention to. The fact that no major 1993 varieties were known prior to this made it all the more exciting. Suddenly, the numismatic world was buzzing with interest in a coin that had spent almost 30 years in a coffee can. As more people combed through their 1993 pennies, only a handful of similar examples emerged. Some had minor doubling but lacked the crispness of Miles's find. Others showed promise but were too circulated to match the original's condition. It quickly became clear that this double die was incredibly scarce, likely the result of a single misaligned die pair used briefly at the Philadelphia Mint. The uniqueness of the coin, and its impeccable state, turned it into a sensation. In late 2022, Miles's 1993 penny was featured in a national coin auction. After several rounds of fierce bidding, it sold for $87,000. The winning bidder was a prominent Lincoln cent enthusiast who believed the coin would be the crown jewel of his collection. Months later, a second MS 64 red example surfaced from a Pennsylvania collector. Though slightly less pristine, it bore all the same doubling markers and fetched $74,000 in a private sale. A third coin, lightly circulated but still showing strong doubling, appeared in 2023. It was sold for $52,000, proving even lower-grade versions had significant market value. What made this coin so compelling wasn't just its rarity, but its quiet nature. It wasn't flashy. It didn't announce itself with wild doubling or radical misprints. Instead, it was the kind of error that demanded focus, patience, and attention to detail, the very qualities that define true collectors. The 1993 double die penny tells a deeper story about how history hides in plain sight. It reminds collectors that even in the most overlooked corners of the coin world, surprises await. Each misaligned die, each hubbing error, each anomaly passed through unnoticed by mint inspectors, adds another layer to the vast narrative of American coinage. Today, the known examples of the 1993 double die penny remain few. They are watched closely, discussed often, and sought by those who understand their importance. While many 1993 cents have long since faded from circulation, the few that escaped with this remarkable error continue to grow in value and mystique. As of now, verified mint state red examples range in market value from $50,000 to $95,000 depending on strike quality, clarity of doubling, and surface condition. The coin that once quietly lay forgotten in a jar has now earned its place in the annals of rare U.S. coinage, proof that even the smallest cent can carry the weight of hidden history, waiting only for the right set of eyes to reveal its worth.